Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Michelle Bowles, and I am hosting this book discussion group with my Imago colleagues. The book is Doing Imago Relationship Therapy in the Space Between by Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt. And this is a tomb. It's an amazing book. It starts out more theoretical, and as you go, it gets more and more practical and really digs into exactly how to do the clinical work. So it's really our clinical textbook, and it's a gift because it's published worldwide. So anybody can get this book and read it. But because it's so meaty, I wanted to take time to read it together as a community and share our thoughts with each other because there are some sentences in here that it's like a five-course meal. It's so rich and satisfying, and it takes a while to even fully understand all the nuances of what's being said. So if you haven't joined us before, there are two other recordings. The first one's an overview of the book. I just went through some of my favorite parts of the book. And the second one is a preface and introduction. And those are on the Facebook group and available by video. If you are joining us today, we're going to be talking about the space within in chapter one, which is contrasted to chapter two, which is focusing on the space between. So, just to start off with the space within, I think that this is a radical uh, chapter, which is really grounded in a lot of history of how we have thought as human beings and where psychology was created and its journey from Freud to modern day ideas. And so it's very meaty. And maybe just start with anybody wanting to share something that really stood out for you in this chapter, and then we'll go through kind of A to Z after we hear from people. But are any things that just really stood out to you that you want to share?
Um, I didn't read this chapter recently, mostly because I was sick, but I'm looking at all my underlines from when I read it before. And the first underline I still like. It says that couples fight because they object to difference. And I was thinking, couples therapy is all about differentiation. Um, and then the other thing I just want to say in general is I've really appreciated, and I've done also in their previous book about just how they take all that they're thinking about, but they do the historical context. Because I'm a generation where I've been here a long time and I've seen a lot of this evolution, and it's so interesting to see all the ties and the connections.
Wonderful. Thank you, Deborah. I'm not going to mirror people just for the sake of time, but just so you know, I'm mirroring you with my eyes. I'm with you. Yes, Carol.
Yeah, so I read this a while ago. So what I underlined and also highlighted was on page 18, the trauma of childhood is replayed as the drama of marriage. Uh,
Say that
the
again.
trauma of childhood is replayed as the drama of marriage and other intimate relationships, and universally as the human drama of conflict and suffering. And so, and in the same section, couples conflict is an instance of the global conflict, and everybody is trying to restore original connection. So that always struck me as so profound and
It's
so
so profound.
applicable to where we are in our world now.
Yes, that I mean that should be a meme,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so that's on page 18, the very first paragraph in the middle of the paragraph. That's beautiful. Thank you, Carol. That is really exactly our theory in a nutshell
Yeah.
and why it's so important for us to be doing this work. Wow. Thank you. Anyone else want to share something that stood out to you or just an overall reflection? Okay, well, so just one thing that we're working on in our marriage is what what we're referring to is like kind of like the spirit of distortion, that sort of like we can get possessed by these ideas, and they're very distorted ideas, and they really block our ability to connect. And so we've been working a lot with like just asking for that distortion to just leave us, and so we can see each other clearly, setting that intention. And on this, the very first page of chapter one, which is page 17, he says, the objection, basically that what you said, Deborah, about we fight objection to difference. And he said the second objection to difference is connected to an expectation, unconscious, that our partners' lives are in the same world in which uh, that like they're in our world, that they see things the
Mhm.
same way we see things. And we sort of assume that, and he calls it a symbiotic illusion. And I mean, I just feel like I get stuck in that symbiotic illusion on such a regular basis. It's almost like a default to my mind. If I'm not doing my daily hygiene of gratitude and appreciations, my brain reverts back to that symbiotic illusion that whatever Stephen's doing, he's clearly doing it against me because he lives in my world and he knows how things work over here, and he wouldn't do that if he knew how things worked. So, and then they talk about how anxiety is triggered and defenses are activated when we're in that symbiotic illusion. So, when we can work with our couples and ourselves to move into gratitude, the brain can't do gratitude and anxiety at the same time. So, if we move into gratitude, it's how I get out of that symbiotic illusion. But of course, when I'm in it, I'm too triggered to remember to do the appreciations.
Mhm.
It's such a um, beautiful framework that they lay out here in just the very first page.
Following on that, since you mentioned anxiety, lower down on the page, I love this part. The sentence starts with, since anxiety is not just a fear of some discomfort, but the imagination of the possibility of extinction, of not being at all, the complaint about an unmet need. And then it goes on. But we have to really tune into the fact of anxiety isn't just I'm anxious about X or Y. I am at this moment, if I am truly anxious, it is if I'm gonna, my brain's gonna blow up, or I'm gonna fall off the world like it's a cliff. And so when people are in that state, and it can be in the symbiotic illusion of the idea that, my partner isn't with me, doesn't see the world, because we get all those messages so early in life about how the world is supposed to be, how life must be lived, that we don't even know all those implicit messages, that are conscious. But that what when we come to that edge, it's not just I'm anxious, it's like I might cease to exist. And that's how people experience that moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you don't see what I see, feel what I feel in the way that I feel it, then I no longer exist is the cause of all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I experience this daily. Daily. Any little thing where Steve and I are not on the same page, I get confused, or I'm just like, oh my gosh, how can we not be on the same page? I'm going to die. You're going to die. Let me just finish your sentence, Deborah, because I like the end of it
Mm,
too. The complaint about an unmet need and the willingness to inflict pain to get it
mhm,
met makes sense because we
mhm.
do believe we're going to die, right?
And our
Not
nervous system,
consciously, right? Consciously.
yeah, and our nervous system is designed to stop us from dying.
Yeah.
And so we do what we have to do in that, that dysregulated moment.
Yeah. Leslie.
Yeah, it's funny that you carried on the sentence because that was the part of that was what I highlighted. That part is like that willingness to inflict pain. If
Yeah.
if 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 I think if part of the power of the dialogue and slowing things down is we get to hear the pain that we're inflicting and have a minute to let it sit with and expand the ability to sit with that discomfort in ourselves. And then,
Oh, I love how you just said that, Leslie.
yeah,
Expand the ability to sit with that discomfort.
because that's to me the key of, because what we try to do in our culture is not feel it.
Hmm.
And that's not, uh, and
If
the
only it worked.
right. And so, but that's why we have so much addiction, so much anxiety, so much
Yeah.
medication. We're all,
Yeah.
and the kid, I'm reading this book called The Anxious Generation. It's really
Mhm.
like it's stuff I knew. It's just very validating to read it all that way,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, um, but this, I just want to say one more thing about this is
Please.
I've been reading about different places about because I'm fascinated by epigenetics and
Yeah.
trauma and how that
Hmm.
intergenerationally is tied to our bodies and our spirit and our mind unconsciously.
Yeah.
And how this idea that we have this unconscious um, platter of experiences that we pull from when we get triggered in our relationship in the present, that whole idea um, is so brilliant. And I think it's even bigger than that.
It
When
is.
when
I think science is validating what you're saying, and yeah, we were talking about, where some of the patterns come from in our marriage and how, and we can trace them back.
and
Yeah.
I think this theory in Harvard like opened the door to that thinking in a way because when you think about the developmental part of this and you think about I know my husband and I absolutely got wounded in the at 3 years old with the exact same wound. Our father's leaving for different reasons, different ways, and we had entirely different reactions to that.
Hmm.
And it drives so much for me.
Yes.
And I know it does for him too. But it, so that, but then, how did the parents that did the things they did, they came by it honestly too. What were they holding? What
Yes.
experiences did they have that epigenetically got transferred to each generation, driving these intergenerational patterns in families and couples and the people you pick and why and when and what do we do with it? So the thing I love about this theory is the solution-oriented piece.
Hmm.
This attempt to calm the sense of fear of extinction so that we can really listen.
Yeah. Yeah, the fear of extinction, that anxiety, and how, if we're not partnered, yes, we can find ways to soothe our own anxiety, but the power of two people deciding that both needs matter, everybody's needs matter, and we're going to feed gratitude to each other to lower each other's anxiety and create a safe space for each other. I mean, that is just so powerful to intentionally love, to intentionally create this container and work with our nervous system that keeps hijacking us into, whatever, what do we call it? The symbiotic illusion.
Right. Which
Yeah.
drives negativity.
Yeah. And creates more
Drives negativity.
unsafety.
Mhm.
Yes, and so on page 18, at the end of that paragraph, after that quote that Carol shared, they talk about that the solution that works for couples will work for everyone with some adaptations to context. Oh, hang on just a second. Okay. There's music playing very loudly all of a sudden in my background. Can you hear it?
I heard
No.
it, but
Okay.
stop.
Zoom will do an okay job canceling it out if I can hear you. Okay.
Hear the dog.
Okay, hang on
Evidently
just a
not
second.
canceling that out. Yeah. Don't you love Zoom for this? Like you get to really see like what's
I love
happening.
that he's here to help me with the dog and the music. It's okay.
They're going for appreciation rather than trigger.
Yeah, I like our house isn't that big, but maybe he was meditating. Um, okay, so let's go to the next section, the perspective of human suffering. I think this is pretty radical, this concept. And Harville has been speaking of this for how many years? 30 years? And it's still pretty radical in our field. That the location of suffering is not in the individual. The individual is not broken, needs to be fixed, needs to be diagnosed and treated, but the location and source of suffering is in the space between. So he does a beautiful job of articulating this concept, sort of the medical model that we started with understanding that, and it really goes back to the geocentric model, which we talked about last time, that in the original concept of the universe, at least as it's told to us today, is that there were gods and the gods were punitive. And if we fell out of favor with the gods, then they would curse our crops. They would cause a drought. They would punish us in some way. And so we needed to be in favor. We had to be good and aligned to what the gods wanted for us. And we also had to then set our the other people in our village straight. Because if you are out of favor with the gods, then I'm also in danger. There's going to be a drought, there's going to be a famine. So the whole model was I need to set you straight and I need to fix myself to be aligned. And we think, oh, we're so far away from that. That's just some silly idea from a long time ago. But no, you just put white coats on the gods. You just put the robes, the priest's robes on the gods. And now, if you're out of favor with the priests, with the doctors, with the psychologist, well, you're going to get labeled. You're going to get a diagnosis of how you're wrong and how you don't make sense. And then the doctor, the expert, the gods are the ones who have to fix, right? And this is so many um, of our, like, just the way I was trained in my master's degree, it was like I was the expert. I was going to diagnose, I was going to treat, I was going to save and set straight and heal. And how dangerous that is for the client and for us to work from that paradigm. But it does serve my ego. I don't know if anyone else has this. It really
There's that.
does. Like, ooh, I really did a good job and I saved this person from their suffering. And, you know, I had a brilliant insight or something. So I just think this is really a radical shift away from a medical model, an individual paradigm, into a relational paradigm that says, you know, if I am grieving, I need community, I need connection. And that might show up looking like depression. And if I'm anxious, it's probably because I'm not in connection. I don't feel a sense of like my community's here, they're going to take care of me. If I get sick, if I run out of resources, that I have connections, I have community to take care of me. So you know, when we shifted to the space between, which I think most social workers think this way, this is very congruent with the theory of social work. Emily is joining us from Austin. Um, this theory that like the environment matters, the connections around us matter, and if the connections are there, we're more likely to have mental health. And so even though it can seem radical to say that we should first look at the relationships before we diagnose, that's pretty radical. It's not how most of our colleagues or the schools are training our colleagues.
I think one of the important lines on that page that I underlined was the cure must relate to the nature of the suffering. And if we don't define the suffering in the way it had been defined, then in essence, we are the cure. The way we deal with our relationships is really going to be the cure to our suffering, is how I see it.
Oh my gosh, where is that, Carol?
That's towards the bottom of the page, third paragraph from the last sentence. In other words, the cure must relate to
What
the nature of suffering.
That's
what page?
another one. Wow,
Page
page 19.
19. Page
The
19.
cure must relate to the nature of the suffering. Wow. So when we uh, mis con, misunderstand where the suffering's located and the nature of it, we misunderstand the cure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And that's what attracted me to Imago in the 1980s, was that we heal each other, that my partner, that my safety is going to be it's going to be how I keep my partner safe and how my partner keeps me safe. And that's the cure. Uh, and that's the healing. And that made sense to me then, and it still has a lot of merit to it.
Yeah.
Although I'm much more going back to the individual in the sense of accountability for oneself, and not looking to the relationship in the way I did when I first got into Imago, that I would be safe if Steve kept me safe, and I don't believe that anymore. That I'm responsible for my own safety, but for the safety
Yes.
of the relationship, I need to keep my partner safe. So
Yes.
suffering is in the relationship. The healing will come from keeping each other safe by being kind, not projecting, being curious.
Yes.
Well,
Yes. And I
I
hate
think,
that. I hate that. Can I just say that, Carol? I really hate that. But I agree. And I think Imago's done a beautiful job of and this whole book about like quantum and the both and, right? That it's both. Your partner has to take some responsibility for keeping you safe, and you have to take some responsibility for keeping yourself safe. And you have to join forces to co-create it.
Exactly.
Yeah. What did you want to share, Deborah?
well, it brings to mind a dysregulation, that if I'm dysregulated, by anything, then my husband's going to move out of connection. It's like if I'm really dysregulated, and again, we're always talking about a continuum, it's I'm not going to be very safe. And it's asking like a superhuman effort on a partner's effect to sort of stay fully present, because our nervous system says danger, danger. And, and so they're going to move out of connection, which of course is going to increase my dysregulation.
Yeah.
But there's a human nature aspect to this. So I think that, I mean, I agree with everything about the environment and about connection is ultimately, the cure for many, many evils, in the world, from, the tiniest to the global scene. Um, at the same time, I think we have to really take the nervous system into account, that it's designed to protect us. And we're all human in that regard. If somebody throws an arrow at us, we don't usually say throw another, let me hear what, we usually get the heck out of the way. So,
Yes. Yeah, that reminds me of the reactivity and response cycle, which I think is so powerful from the keeping workshop that Carol created and worked on. And I just think it's so powerful when you can see the reactivity cycle that you just described, Deborah, where something puts me out of regulation. My partner gets triggered. He tells himself a story about what that means. He has a reaction. I tell myself a story about what that means, and we start having reactions. And then
Right.
how we can consciously choose then to have a more empathic story. And as we have a more empathic story, our response changes and we get out of the reactivity cycle and into a response cycle. But that requires that conscious decision, that choice point. And for
And
me,
I think we usually have to come down from the highly
oh,
dysregulated state
yes,
in order to access
yeah,
that. Yeah,
we do,
for sure.
we do,
Yeah,
we do. But it's also like a neural pathway that we can build and train
totally.
so that we come out of it easier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But absolutely, and especially if we like the epigenetic piece that Leslie was talking about, if we have a history, our reactivity is just, it's very intense and it really hijacks our entire mind, body, spirit, and is so
Hmm.
powerful. But what I was going to say is one of the daily hygienes that I work on is appreciations. But the other one that I've been working on is validation, to sincerely try
Hmm.
to find the way that my partner is making sense so that my brain gets in a habit of doing that stretch into his world and get out of that symbiotic illusion. So it's one of those daily hygienes. And the more I make my brain do that, the more the neural pathways available to me. It's really such hard work. It's like going to the gym. I gotta do it a lot, and it's really easy to lose track of my intentions.
Yeah,
Great point, Michelle.
yeah.
Wonderful point.
Going back to um, this idea of Michelle that you said you hate. I'm curious why you hate it. For me, I like that idea. Like that makes me feel calm because
Yeah.
I've been with my husband for so long and I can't even imagine a day without him.
Oh.
And he is the biggest healing source in my life
Mm.
and has been for all these years. Um and I hope I've been that for him too.
Yeah.
Um so this idea of if I was totally dependent on him to lower my anxiety and cure me, and then he died, that is just as fearful to me. And,
True. That's true.
right. And so
Yes.
like to me, that creates like wild anxiety and fear.
Yes.
So the idea that I can self-regulate too, that it's the and
Yes.
actually calms me. It gives me some hope
Yes.
for when, the ultimate might happen. At our age,
Oh,
think about that a lot
yeah.
because we
Yes. Oh, I
are,
love what you're saying, Leslie. Yes, it's the most immature part of me that hates it. I just want to blame and not take any responsibility for what we're co-creating. I'm kind of joking and I'm kind of not. Like
no, I get it. I totally get it, but
it's
I
like a
was just
little humble
curious. Like,
pie, but I like what you're saying because it's inspiring me to be like, yes, keep doing your daily emotional hygiene, of relational hygiene, because yes, of course. And that is the thing is as a relationship when it's I mean we are like this.
it's
We're like
interdependent.
we're like a heartbeat, which is good. We're alive. We go up and down, up and down. But when we're in an up place, then my terror becomes about losing him. When we're
Yeah.
in a down place, then
Oh, yeah.
it's a
No
it's a
way.
different story.
But
Yeah.
so the other thing is in relationship to this that I was thinking as I was listening to everybody's like brilliant comments. I'm learning so much. I wish I didn't have to leave early because we're only on page 2 or 3.
We're on page 20 now.
Okay, but you know what I mean, 2 or 3
Yes.
in the chapter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is like I work a lot with the recovering community, like people recovering from substance abuse and alcohol use disorder, and couples where one or both are in that situation. And so that's why I'm so present about trauma and epigenetics and all that. But also, I think that in these realms, and really in every couple, there's like this idea that we have to have, that what we need is a dialogue with self, a dialogue with other, and a dialogue with something that we believe is more powerful than us, whatever that is, whether it's the collective community of people that we're with, or whatever that is for people.
Right, right.
And that if we have all three of those in some sort of a balance and a practice,
Hmm.
this being the practice that I use most of the time,
Yeah.
when I'm consciously choosing.
Yes, I love what you're saying, that there's many ways for us to be resourced. And those are three really great ways to think about our own, what are we doing for ourselves, the relationship, and then a relationship with source, God, universe, higher power,
Whatever it is for you.
whatever. Yes.
It's
Um,
something.
Michelle, I want to jump back just one step.
Hi,
Um,
Emily. There you
Hi.
are.
I'm sorry I was late, everyone. I had a client until 11:30. But I want to just jump back one step, because Michelle, what you said about hating that part actually made a lot of sense. I mean, I can be on both sides, but it made a lot of sense to me, and I didn't want you to throw yourself under the bus too much. Because I think, and I don't know if this is true for you, but I feel like I came from a background that was more, there was more neglect than
Mhm.
abuse, like if we're looking at, from on that sort of continuum. And I think that there's a young part of me that, um, because of the neglect, I had to take care of myself so much,
Mhm.
is pissed off
Yeah.
that I have to do that. That like, no, like
Join
I've
me, Emily. I
never,
love it.
I've never had that care. Like, and now I'm an adult and there's no one, like there's no one, there's never going to be that perfect care that I should have received when I was smaller. And so it
Mhm.
makes sense to me that, especially if you came from that sort of background, that there would be a part that was pretty dissatisfied with the unfairness of having to take on that responsibility for yourself when you never got that growing up.
Oh, thank you, Emily. So much love. Um, yeah, there's that, and there's also like, yeah, I just want to add that like when I take full responsibility, self-responsibility, how freeing that is. Um, yeah, but there's still that little girl in me that's like looking for the perfect, you know,
Yeah.
prince slash parent to, you know, take full responsibility and take great care of me. Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, this is the journey that I think we all, I think it was Leslie who referred to a while ago, is we're all on this journey to build our capacity for discomfort,
Yes.
and that's the discomfort of the unfairness, it's the discomfort of the wounds that keep resurfacing, it's the idea that we can't have what we want when we want it, the symbiotic illusion. I mean, discomfort's around every corner, if you think about it.
Yes.
You
It
know,
really is.
it truly, truly is. And so I think that, we just have to realize that that's a forever journey, really.
It is. It is. And what's so beautiful is this book actually is like a map to
Hmm.
help us on that journey, full of incredible wisdom. So on page 20, just to highlight, I was talking about the geocentric model of the universe. Um, and just, I'm going to read a couple lines just to kind of flesh that out, put a little meat on the bone. Human beings were viewed as a creation of the divine agency on the top floor who owns and cares for them and regulates how they should live and relate to others and to the divine agency. Regulatory power over humans was assigned by the transcendent, transcendent, Am I
Transcendent.
saying that right?
Transcendent.
Transcendent, thank you.
Yeah.
By the transcendent to a special order of religious and political authorities who also claimed ownership and control of humans as their right because they were representatives of the transcendent agency. So that's sort of where I think what he's really highlighting is that's where we as counselors, psychologists, doctors, that's where we get our authority from, even if we're not conscious of it. This is the source of our claimed authority over diagnosing other people. And so this idea of, it's our job to save people from this lower level and set them straight. In this universe, suffering was anxiety about one's relationship to the beings who inhabited the transcendent realm. That's at the last paragraph on page 20. So here, the anxiety is about getting in trouble. And I made up a acronym, what's the one, fear of missing out?
FOMO.
FOMO, right? I made up FOGET, which is the fear of getting in trouble, because so many of my clients have FOGET.
Totally.
Yeah, and it's comes from this idea that, like, on some level, our anxiety comes from we'll be punished.
Mhm.
And if we're really good, like Stephen and I are with each other, we'll project that onto the other person and be convinced the other person wants to punish us.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then we're in our power struggle. And then he talks about on page 21, the second stage of human social evolution with its new view of human nature and human suffering called the Age of Reason. And this was a total transformation of thought, so they thought, a total reorganization, and the emergence of a new culture based on reason and science rather than faith. But the ancient spiritual view of human nature and of suffering and its cure remained intact in this new worldview. Disguised as science and reason, there's still this underlying idea that somebody has the authority to judge and compare people one to the other, finding some lacking, finding some superior. That kind of idea was disguised within this old paradigm. And there was down a little bit further, he's linking this to Newton and this autonomous self, which is independent and self-sufficient, replaced the shackled serf of the Middle Ages, who neither belonged to themselves nor had any freedoms. But really, I think what's important here is that we we are still shackled if we don't claim authority over our own lives and our own relationships. If we're still looking to experts, we're looking to gods, we're looking to a god, whoever we're looking to. And until we claim authority over our own lives, our mind, our thoughts, our choices, that's where that self-responsibility comes from, Carol, that you were talking about. Then we're really going to be anxious.
Because they don't have the answers. I mean, look at doctors and how they act as if, and then we lose all of our agency because we're giving it up to them.
Yes. And our couples come in with this attitude of, Michelle, you have to save us.
Mhm.
You have to help us. You have to fix him. You have to fix her. You have to, and we can get seduced into this role.
Well, that's why I love the idea that we're facilitators of connection, of a process, and that they're responsible for their own healing. We're just trying to help them to find the way. I'm going to have to leave in 10 minutes. I'm going to be working with Harville and Helen and Joanne Ariadis at Cape Cod to teach therapists this weekend. So
Wonderful.
hearing a lot of quantum stuff, and I wanted to get a little bit of taste, but I thought it was at 11 that we were meeting, so I'm so sorry.
No, I'm so glad. Please give them our best. And thank you. Is there anything you want to say before you have to leave, Carol?
No, I just am anxious to hear the recording that and the parts that I missed. I think this is wonderful. I have found this chapter, I read it at least twice, and I have the audio, and I find it very dense, and I find myself feeling really dense because I am not understanding a lot of pieces of it, and my head starts swimming. So I mean, this is great. I like that you're chewing it in little bites, but there are lots of parts of it that, you know, just I have question mark, question mark, question mark. So I'm glad to see that there's some resonance with other people here. I feel quite guilty listening to Harville talk about quantum and not having really digested this book. But love you all, and I hope to see you at another meeting.
All right, thanks,
You
Carol.
too, Carol.
Bye.
Thanks
So
for everything.
at the end of page 22, he says, few therapy systems indicated that the problems were caused by relationships. Therapy has logically been directed at relieving the tensions of the inner world by excavating and understanding the mental content of memories, dreams, and the imagination, and returning the information to the conscious self with an explanation of what it all means, and with this assumption that insight can restore the connections that preceded the onset of symptoms. And I don't think anyone is on that page today. Most therapists are not on this page. Any trauma training, so much has come to light to understand that no, a lot of problems are caused by relationships, and a very large percentage. And that it's different than blaming the mother, which was the old kind of schizophrenic analytical frame. Um, but really understanding that the this is epigenetic, this is, there's a social journey that we go on in the culture where we get repressive messages socially, and that our relationships are very varied and complex from a very early age, and our own individual neurobiology also impacts how we receive and how we hear the repressive messages. So it's, I like that we can keep it really complex. Um, but basically the problem is assigned to stress in relationships with significant others. This is page 23 at the top. And the resolution to change is in relationships, and that change produces a change in the interior of the self. So when the relationship changes, it produces a change inside. And like Deborah's pointing out, when we're dysregulated on the inside, that impacts the relationship. So we create the space and we are created out of the space. And that's what I love, is it's this quantum flow of energy, and without intention, it tends to go towards the negativity bias and the dysregulation and the negative stories. And on page 23, he talks about a relational self, um, which was a new concept coming out of the analysis, out of the analytical field, self-psychology, and it was kind of a bridge. So it was starting to say, oh, the self is embedded in a relationship. But Harville went a step further, which is really important to understand. And he's saying, actually, there is no self. The self is the relationship. The self is created out of all the relationships. It cannot be taken out of reality. We are, yes, we're in relationship, but we are relationship. We're in a process. The self is not a static thing, but it's always in process. And I think this is just a huge shift. Um, so this is at the end of the first paragraph, the self as relationship, and it's a quantum concept.
Well, I find this easier to grasp when you think of a small child, is that, we get our sense of who we are by how we're mirrored by our caretakers. And, if you put a child, away from that, right, they don't thrive. We know that. And these are all those implicit messages that we get by, I always say the way our skin lays on our bones, you know, our tone of voice and our eyes and how that child is mirrored. And so, you know, that's how we become who we are, is totally out of that early relationships, those early relationships. And so, you know, it kind of continues into adulthood, of course. But seeing it as a young child makes it, to me, makes it easy to understand that idea of we are relationship.
Yeah, that relationship is so powerful and so clear when we see someone tiny with caretakers and the
Yeah.
power the caretakers have.
I saw this photograph recently of my little 2-year-old grandson, and it's this fabulous photograph. His hands are outreached and he's looking at his parents. And there's this combination of wonder and vulnerability and feeling loved. I wish I could capture the
Mm,
words on that are all in this one picture in this one face, but I'm just looking at him kind of drinking in how his parents, you know, are responding to him, you know, in that moment.
mhm.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and we can really we as we do work in the clinical world, we really come to appreciate how powerful that is, both the positive and the negative interactions we see. And that's sort of the idea for our adult relationships, is to get to a place where we treat our partner the way we would treat a child, right? With this kind of total love and wonderment and appreciation. So I'm going to skip ahead to page 33. The other paragraphs are really reviews of psychological theory, which if you're a student or haven't reviewed theory for a while, that might be really worth reading. But I want to get into interpersonal neurobiology. You know, all of us came up when Dan Siegel came on the scene. Most of us had some exposure to Dan Siegel early on. And out of his work came interpersonal neurobiology, which really just reinforced everything Imago had been doing for more than a decade at that point, maybe even, I don't know, maybe even two. Um, but yeah, it says 2006, and Siegel starts to use a term for the self, MWE, MWE. It's a combination of me and we, the MWE. And, you know, really, he and Harville are on the same page here, uh, where he is understanding. And I'm going to just say, so this paragraph, it's the third one after the title on page 33. Relationships, mind, and brain are not different domains of reality. They're each about energy and information flow, and the mechanism is the exchange between the brain, subjective impressions, and in Imago we would call that, you know, our stories or narratives, and the conscious mind. In this triad, relationships are defined as a flow of energy and information between people. So I just want to take a pause there because that's such a powerful sentence. Relationships are the flow of energy and information between people, which begs us to ask, what is the information that we're participating in exchanging?
Mhm.
What is the energy that we're participating in exchanging in our relationships with everybody on the planet, not just our partners? He says this makes the mind an embodied and relational process. That's really powerful. The mind is an embodied and relational process, not a thing, but a process. We do not own mind, it is shared between people, and this makes us profoundly interconnected. So that, I just think that's so powerful. And he talks about this oscillation of information and energy. Relationships are the way we share that flow. And this is sort of the context Harville shares to kind of bring us into why the quantum field matters, because the quantum field is mind. It is a shared mind. And it's not just between my partner and I, we all share one mind and many minds. So really, such a beautiful thing. And the way Harville then grounds our theory, not in psychology, not in psychology. Psychology, yes, but also social, the social journey, also the cosmic journey, also the evolutionary journey. So he's grounding all of that in physics, in the flow of energy and information. And some of the flow of energy and information is impacted by our biology, by our history, our psychology, by our socialization. All of these things are in the field. And that's where we work as Imago therapists, is we work in the field. We attune to the energy and information flow in the field, and how do we keep it safe enough for there to be some progression in that process, the process of the mind.
Very well articulated, Michelle.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to scoot off. So
Well,
it's
we are
lovely to be
almost
with
we're
everybody.
almost wrapped. So
Okay.
goodbye, Deborah. Thank you
Great.
for being here. It's
Yeah.
such a joy to spend the morning with you, and I
Yeah,
hope to
you
see you
as well.
soon.
Thank you for hosting this. That's
Hmm.
awesome. Okay.
I hope you feel
Bye.
better soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'm so sorry I was in the car most of the time, but I enjoyed the discussion. I have to scoot off too, but this is fascinating. It's a lot to think about.
Amen.
A lot to think about.
All right. Well, we'll
Good to
just,
Thank
meet
you.
you, Linda.
Good
Yeah.
to see you, Linda.
Yes,
Bye,
Linda, before
Linda.
you get off, where do you live? Where are you?
I'm in the Hampton Roads area, so I'm in Virginia, next to the North
Oh.
Carolina line.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm in Western North Carolina, so good to meet you.
Yes, and
Nice to meet you
Linda,
as well.
when is your clinical training there?
The
October.
training is actually September we adjusted the dates. It's September I think it's the third week in September. If I could
Okay, great, great. So if
get my
anybody knows
calendar.
anybody who's looking to train, Linda and Maureen Bryan will be training in that area, so we can have some more Imago therapists in that area.
Yeah, September the 19th through the 22nd. We should be putting something out into the community.
Good. Put it in the Facebook group so we can see it.
Okay.
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 Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so we're just kind of moving to the summary, which is on page 34. As the concept evolved, the adjective relating became attached to the insulated self as something I did. So relating became an action. And then we expanded it. Relational became a characteristic of the self, expanding something I did to something I am, a chronic activity or a trait. I am relational. And this made relationship essential to the self, with which it had to the self has to be relational. But then he goes on, the final step shifts the self in relationship to the self as relationship. And so this chapter really takes us on the journey, and there's a beautiful chart on page 35 comparing the individual paradigm to the relational paradigm. So we move from suffering is in the individual, the self needs to basically be evaluated and be treated and healed by an expert. And this idea of the space interior space, we move from that to a relational paradigm where everybody makes sense and the expertise is in the space between us. The healing power is in the mind, the field that exists between us and is co-created by us. And so it's just a beautiful chapter, I think, moving from basically feeling like someone else has authority over us to our own authority. And as we move into this world where everybody makes sense, it's a much safer world. It's a much more beautiful world. And my brain wakes up grumpy and terrified every day. So there's the ideal, and then there's the work. So maybe if we could just do a round and have everybody share something that you heard today, you're taking away, you're chewing on, or if there's a question as a group we can play around with.
So, was it supposed to be one word?
No, no, just anything you're taking away, anything you're
Well,
chewing on from today, any questions
so,
you still have.
so on page 34, there's a line that says, quantum field theory comes to the rescue. I think that's the thing I'm taking away. Yeah.
You know,
I
I
love
too,
it. Sorry, I muted my.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I had read this chapter. I'm going back to it. I see that I did not do a lot of highlighting and underlining. And I think as we talk about it today, I can really see, excuse me, the scope of where we start and where we end, like right on the verge of the space between, which I did not understand before, except as just a nice idea. But I can see that this is a very profound concept, and I really didn't grasp, even though I read it, I didn't grasp that this really follows changes in the study of physics. And so I think that's pretty amazing, because personally, I took a class in college called Physics for Non-Scientists, and the whole idea of quantum physics was way beyond me. I had some idea about Newtonian physics, I think, you know, the study of gravity, the study of motion, all that stuff. But this all was new. And believe me, I never knew there was a word called wavicle, you know, as we get on the verge of studying that next week. And what does that have to do with us and our relationships and our couplehood? I just think it's dazzling. And I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Leslie. Emily?
Oh, Jill, did you want to go? I saw you unmute yourself. Go ahead.
So I came here today only because the space between, I love the space between. I had no, and I saw a book, but I came here, I ordered the book as soon as you started talking. So I don't even have the book, but I love being around the like-minded community of Imago therapists, and I just eat it all up. And even though I was trained in 1995, maybe, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, I became like a devotee of Haiti Schleifer.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I go and assist at her workshops and do all of her trainings except the master. And I just ate up the space between because it was so delicious to watch her work and to be around the space between. So the space between is something that it just resonates for me. But the space within and the book, I know nothing about any of that from Harville's perspective. And so I'm just inspired. And I bought the book. I'm going to start reading the book. I'm going to underline, I'm going to highlight, I'm going to put question marks. And I look forward to coming back again.
Oh, Jill, that's great. Thank you.
I actually read this book a long time ago, and then I haven't reread it, and so I was revisiting it kind of as we were going along. And But I think what I'm taking away is the reminder that in Imago, that relationship is primary. And I think, I'm thinking about the work that I do with individuals, is much more that individual paradigm as opposed to the relational. I mean, like it's all tied in there, hence the whole relational piece. But just kind of recentering myself on the relational side, and kind of keeping myself honest with that is important, and bringing in more of the both and, which I strive to do, but it's always a good reminder.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you, Emily. It's so good to see you. I hope I get to see you in person next week, maybe.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah,
Wait, are you even that early?
I am. So I live in Costa Rica, and but I have offices in Austin. So I'm going home to Austin on Thursday, on my way to a castle to do the Getting Love You Want workshop in Thornbury Castle in England. So I'm very excited about that.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's already happening. So
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's all happening, and we're going to be live streaming it. So I'll put that in the Facebook group. Thank you, everyone. I think I'll put the next event. I think it'll be September 20th, and it'll be a Friday at the same time. So I'll
All
post it
right.
in Facebook. Thank you all for joining
Thank
us.
you so much.
You
Yeah.
just
Thanks.
made
Good to
my
meet
day
everybody.
being
Safe
together.
travels, Michelle.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next time, I hope. Bye-bye.